Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started here with today's session. Today's session is one of 4 that is actually being conducted for our Denali upgrade, and the subject of today's is the patient portal, the new employer portal. So these are pieces that are external to the EMR and the billing side specifically. Now there will be a couple of overlaps, of course, with regards to setup that we will mention, but specifically the content of today is dealing with the portals. First of all, we're going to look at the patient portal itself and some increased functionality there. First of all, for those of you now, and keep in mind that a lot of these features you may or may not be allowing your patients to use. Everything on the portal is controlled by the settings and configuration that you define for your patients. So even though we're providing this functionality, it doesn't mean that your patients are going to be doing it, because if you have not already given them the ability, for instance, as in this first instance that we're looking at, to update insurance, then this enhancement will not impact them. But if you do allow them the feature, then the enhancement will be applicable. So the first thing is, with regards to insurance updates, the type field has been changed to allow the patient now to modify multiple insurances if they have more than one. Previously, there was a type field which patients didn't really know what that was about. The field has been obsolete because it's not even mandatory anymore in the billing world. So now that allows the patient to see all of the insurances that exist on their chart under the insurance, the umbrella icon inside EMR. And if they need to modify it, they have that ability to do so. Along with this, we are allowing multiple insurances now. So the patient can also add multiple insurances if needed. Another change on the fields is when the relationship is employer, such as for workman's comp. Previously, it continued to ask for subscriber fields, so those fields are now hidden since they're not mandatory. Now, again, this is controlled by property, so at the bottom, for those of you who may or may not already be using this and you've chosen to now allow the patients, there's the property at the bottom that you need to set to allow this update, to allow this permission. Another change is with regards to lab results. You'll see a comparison here of the existing screen to the new screen. It looks more closely now to the screen that you have inside the EMR application itself with regards to the way results are being presented. Because of this, there are new columns added. The patient now has access to order level as well as test level remarks and attachments. Now this particular slide is an existing feature, so it's not brand new to the Denali upgrade itself, but again, we're just kind of reintroducing it to you FYI because it mentions these properties in conjunction with lab results. In case you are not aware or if you want to tweak them. When it comes to patient portal and the patient being able to view their results automatically online, you have options, whether you want them to see them immediately for X number of days or only after you as the physician have gone in and marked them as reviewed. So these are the properties that control that behavior in case you need to tweak them. Now, with regards to the lab result attachments, there you now have the ability, again, inside Prognosis, you can attach either at an order level or at an individual test level, and those will now be conveyed to the patient accordingly based on this new user interface. So when the patient is logged in and looking at their results, the yellow highlighted row is the order level. So you'll notice in the bold font across the screen, it has the order date, the order number, the vendor, and then it says all tests, and then each individual test will display underneath it. So if there is an attachment inside EMR at the order level, then this is where they will see it inside the yellow line as you see where the number 1 is pointing. But if the attachment, such as an incoming fax or a scan that has been attached by your front desk as a lab result, is at a test level, then it will be applicable to the individual test, as you see by the number 2. Now, with regards to these attachments, either at the order level or the test level, there can be up to 5. So the patient will have the ability, when they click that icon, to choose then within the drop-down list each of the individual attachments. And again, the remarks is a separate icon that they can see, and it's just the free text, as you see an example here. And that would be, again, whether they've clicked it at the order level or the test level. So these are all features that they previously did not have, the ability of viewing the remarks and the attachments. And in order to accommodate that, the user interface itself has been redesigned to give them the option to have these icons now. The order level remarks, of course, are attached, as you see here, under the lab results screen. And that could be all-inclusive. It could be an attachment and or text remarks. So that's all based on however you do your labs inside your practice, if they're going to be able to see both the attachment and or the remarks. You do not have the ability of hiding one or the other. So if you're going to let them view the results at all, based on these properties up here, for those number of days that you define and whether or not you've reviewed it yet or not, once that result is available to the patient on the portal and you have remarks and attachments, those also will be available to the patient. Requesting appointments. Another change has been to add a contact number on the appointment request itself. Now this is a new property that you see at the bottom of the slide. This is not stored inside EMR. So this is strictly for when the patient, if you have given them the ability of requesting appointments online from the portal and you want to have a phone number that you can call them if you're going to confirm or deny their appointment request. This gives, and you can make it mandatory through this property, that in order for them to request the appointment, they have to enter this phone number. Excuse me. They have to enter this phone number. Another new feature is clinic shared documents. Now this is also covered in our EMR webinar for the EMR session, because that is where you actually share the document. This would be with regards to any potential document on the patient's document list, not just results. And if you want to share those. So this is a little different than what we were just talking about, where the lab result comes in and gets attached as a lab result. That's what we just looked at through the attachments. Now here we're talking specifically as to documents on the patient's document list, which may also still be a lab result that you've scanned and attached, but it could be something else as well that you're giving them permission to view. So there is an option now called clinic shared documents, where anything that you've attached inside the chart can also be visible to the patient. The patient will have similar filter ability on this screen that you do on your document list. So this is basically a patient version of your document list. They'll be able to specify date range if they want to. They can specify the document type, the attending provider, the category. Then they can search based on those filters or clear those filters. Now at the end of the PowerPoint here, there is an appendix that mentions every document type and the conditions as to whether or not they can be shared on the portal for your patient. So this again is a local decision on a document by document basis as to whether or not you will make it visible to your patient. But now that this feature's there, your patients may start calling and wanting to know what it's all about. So if it's something that you're not going to utilize, you do have the option of concealing this feature from the patients. As I mentioned at the beginning, all of these features are configurable, meaning they're also hideable. So if you don't want to open up a can of worms where patients are calling you, you can hide this menu option completely so that they don't see it. But if they are going to see it, then you have the added ability of sharing documents with them so they're not phone calling the office. So you can work all of that into your workflow however it fits into your processes. The next new feature on the portal, which is a very nice, convenient one, is the ability for patients to electronically sign documents. So this is your legal documents. For those of you who, maybe if you've been a long-term client, you used an external signature pad a few versions back before we had the internal PrognoSign. Now that we introduced the electronic PrognoSign in the a couple versions ago, it is now available on the patient portal. So it's up to you now if you want your patients to sign these in advance from home and then transmit it to you so that when they arrive for their appointment, they're already signed, or if you still want to have them sign them at the front desk. That's entirely up to you. Either way, the documents are bidirectional. So if they sign it in the office, the signed version will be displayed here on the portal for the patient to have a record of. And if they sign it at home, you will have a copy in the EMR. Now, of course, this requires the document to be configured through our engineering team to accept the electronic signature. Once they do, you just simply use the mouse on the computer to sign it. So where we see the signature here in box number 3, you would just scroll down on the document. It's just a PDF document that the patient will open. This screen on the portal is the exact same screen you have in EMR. So when you're under the patient register or the schedule and you click the legal documents icon and this interface opens for the documents, it's the same thing that your patients will see at home on the portal. So they will scroll down inside the PDF, click where it says to do so, use the mouse, or if they're on an iPad, they can use their finger or a stylus to sign their name and then submit it to the EMR. Now, along with all of the interactions that the patient has on the portal, there's some enhancements with regards to the notifications. These are the automated messages that the user receives within their prognosis inbox based on user role and property configuration. So different activities your patient performs can trigger messages to you at the office, whether you are the doctor, the nurse, the medical assistant, the front office receptionist, whomever in your office needs to receive this information that the patient has done it is controlled by the way you define these different properties that we're going to touch on. And the notification content has been enhanced. So the functionality's always been there. It's just kind of enhanced as far as the underlying templates and the details that are going to be included in that message so that you have more at your fingertips instead of having to open up different screens and patient register or the encounter or whatever. So the first such activity would be the patient forms. If your patients are submitting forms on the portal, you see there bullet point number 3, there is a role, and if that role has been assigned to whoever in your practice has that role assigned to them that is defined in that property will get this message in their prognosis inbox telling them that the patient has completed this form. And if you see the comparison here and versus the one outlined in pink is what you get now versus the one outlined in blue on the left is what you will start getting after the upgrade. It's a little more detailed, giving you the actual name of the form as well as the date of service, the patient's date of birth, and so on. So it gives you a lot more detail so that you can then take the appropriate action within your practice. For patients requesting appointments from the portal, same thing. The message has been enhanced to give you more detail. And as we mentioned a couple slides ago, now that you can require them to include a phone number, if you see here on my number 2 outlined in blue right above the bubble, that is where the phone number will display. So when you're getting the message, you can immediately be able to call to confirm or cancel or reschedule whatever you need to do. If the patient is requesting refills from the portal, same functionality. There is a user role that can be designated to those of you who need to do that. And then in conjunction with the refills, that is you getting notified the patient's requested the refill. Now, once the physician or whomever in your practice is designated to approve the refill request, when it's completed, then the patient gets a notification that the refill is done and waiting at the pharmacy. Now, this can be suppressed if you want to, but most patients like, or most clinics like their patients to be notified that the doctor has completed the request so that they know they can go to the pharmacy and pick it up. And there's just an example here of what it would look like whether the pharmacy is included or not. When there is a pharmacy on the prescription, it will include the specific pharmacy details, the address and phone number. So all of the functionality available to you does, of course, require the setup in the portal. We mentioned that new phone number that you can make mandatory. This is the property. Those of you who have the configuration rights will have access to this property to make the phone number mandatory. There's also a property where you can define a number of minutes after which a patient is not going to be able to block a slot. So like if your end of day is 5, you don't want a patient to book an hour-long appointment at 4:30, then you could set this for 30 minutes. And if the patient tries to book an hour-long appointment at 4:30, it will give them an error and they won't be able to do so. The legal documents tab, if you want them to be able to do their electronic signing of consent forms, this is the property where you can assign that code. The code is LEG for legal. Incidentally, this is just the screen where overall you're able to configure the menu options that your patient has and the name of those tags that the patient is seeing. Now, in order for the legal document to be available, I mentioned a couple slides back that it's bidirectional, meaning that if the patient signs it online, it's available in EMR and vice versa. That is contingent on this checkbox at the template level being set. So when a document is being created for your practice through engineering that requires electronic signature, you do need to make it known in your request if it needs to be available on the portal. By default, it will not automatically be applicable to the patient on the portal. By default, it's only available inside the EMR system. To add clinic shared documents, this is the menu option. It's that same property we saw a little bit ago. It's just a different tag. And then here's all the different properties for the roles that can be created for the different notifications. The patient form notifications, appointment request notifications, refills, and so on. Now at the very bottom, you'll notice the supported event property, number 216. That is the one that controls whether or not the patient is going to get notified of that refill. So in conjunction with these properties where you define a role, these top 3 bullets at the bottom here, and the role you define in the property is assigned to individual humans within your practice. Then for patients to get notified, you also need to go into the supported event library and activate number 216, and then that will ensure that the patients get notified of the refill requests. And conversely, if you don't want patients notified, then you shut that supported event off. So those are the changes at the patient portal level. Now, a brand new feature is the employer portal. So in the billing webinar, we talk about a new feature called employer billing. Well, the entire workflow has been enhanced for those of you who do employer billing. There's also now an employer portal. So employers have the ability of attaching to a patient's chart and viewing different components that you allow. Now this employer portal is designed again to allow employers who are registered with the clinic to securely access a patient's PHI. And that would be with regards to both the clinical side and EMR as well as the financial side of practice management. Primarily, this is intended for occupational medicine clients, but any specialty that we have that does employer billing is able to take advantage of this for drug screening, employee assistance programs, and so on. There is setup required, which we cover in our EMR webinar under the settings configuration. We covered in the billing webinar. And there is a new unique uniform resource locator or URL that has to be provided from Vismatics to the employer to access the portal. The employer portal, now this would be FYI for your employers if they're going to use it, or for yourselves if you want to attach as a user if you want to see what your employers see. It is compatible with Google Chrome, with Internet Explorer 11 with compatibility view off. It's not compatible with older versions of Internet Explorer, and it is also compatible with Safari. It is available for you whether you're EMR only or EMR and practice management. So even though it was developed in conjunction with the billing workflow, you do not need our billing product in order to use the employer portal, because there is the ability of attaching to the patient's document list and seeing their clinical information as well. To access the URL internally, under your I button, which is a system tray icon in the upper right of your system once you've logged in, there's a new option there called Employer Portal, and it has a click here link that gives you that uniform resource locator. And then you can copy and paste that into your browser if you need to do it yourselves, or put it into an email if you're sending it to an employer. Excuse me. Please note, if you are logged into EMR at your desk and you also want to log into the employer portal, you do want to do it through a new window. So underneath Internet Explorer, you would choose File, New Session, and within Chrome, you would say New Incognito Window. You don't want to just open a new tab within your existing window. If you're going to present it to your employers through your website, if you as a doctor or as a clinic have a clinic or a corporate website, then this can be embedded as a link or a graphic structure, just as your patient portal can be. So you would just provide that URL to your web designer, and you can contact technical support in order to get a file to share with your web designer. You also, as I just mentioned, can access it manually by copying and pasting the URL into your browser or typing it directly into the browser. You would have to type the entire URL. And when you're automating an email to the employer with their login credentials, you can modify your template to include the URL automatically, so that when the employer gets that email telling them their ID and password, it also has the click here with the URL. So you can either automate it on your website or manually do it, whichever works in your practice workflow. Now the setup inside EMR for this new portal. First of all, there are permissions involved. As always, you need to have the appropriate user permissions to the employer master. So this is a vendor. So under the configuration vendors, you would need access to update and create if needed, or delete the employer master. And then if you're going to modify the portal settings for the employers, that is also a user level permission. And these can be assigned to individual humans within your practice. Then we have the employer master itself under vendors. And again, for those of you that do employer billing, it is critical that you use the employer master and don't just free text in the name of the patient's employer. So the employer master does allow you to store contact information. It will require their tax ID in order to email them their password credentials for the portal. So that is why you do need to use the master file. Excuse me. There is no limit, by the way, for number of users to get in there. So if the employer Maybe there's an accounting department, maybe there's human resources, whoever at the employer needs access, they can all use the same login. And that email will be generated to whomever requests it, and then they need to share it with each other. So it's not like users in Prognosis where each individual user needs a login. This is for an employer. There are validation alerts when you're creating the employer telling you that you do need an email address and federal tax ID. Then there's a new master file under configuration for your employer portal settings. So a few slides up, when we were talking about configuring the patient portal, they were under settings configuration properties. This is its own dedicated screen called employer portal settings. So you can set them all in one user interface. And it's kind of in three sections here that we're going to look at. You have your login setup, which is where you're going to determine the rule for the password for the employer. And then you've got 4 fields there where you can customize a greeting and a disclaimer that appears on the login screen so that whenever anybody from the employer logs in, you dictate what they're reading as they enter their user ID and password. You control what's in the patient band. This is very similar to when you're on the encounter screen in EMR, the bright blue area across the top of your face sheet, where you've got 8 pieces of data. You have that here as well for patient level records. And then there's tabs, which right now is only, you've got your EMR documents and you've got your billing documents. So it's kind of limited as far as the functionality in this first version. Those are the only 2 tabs you have to choose from. So number 1, the login setup. Password rule for auto generation. This lets you define at a clinic level a standard password that will apply for all employers' initial default one-time password. Now, just like every password in Prognosis, it's good for one time only, whatever the user is going to be assigned. So whether it's password 1, temp 1234, it follows all of our same rules that it has to be between 8 and 10 digits long, at least 1 letter, at least 1 number. And the first time it is used by any human at the employer, it does immediately expire. Then you have a show disclaimer switch that you can turn on or off. This is a license agreement that most software applications have, and you customize the content of that. So whatever content you want to display for your employers, since they're accessing your patient data, you can send that to us or attach it here. You don't even need to send it to us, because if you see number 3 allows you to attach it. And then number 4 allows you to free text in 4 different lines of your default greeting, such as welcome to the employer portal, the name of your practice maybe, or the doctor's office, and then a paragraph introducing or defining the content. So all of these settings is what you will see on the login screen, which we'll see in just a little bit. Then the patient band, again, this loosely mirrors what you have in your encounter screen, but you can customize it. So by default, you see here the patient's name, gender, age, date of birth, their cell phone, their insurance, chart number, and their address. Maybe the employer doesn't need to know who their insurance is, because usually for employer billing, insurance isn't in the picture. So you might want to display something else other than the insurance in that field. And in order to change the tags, as the number 2 is pointing to the little magnifying glass, you would just click on the magnifying glass. Excuse me. And here's an example of what the tags look like. So you don't really need to be a programmer to do this. You can tell by the name what is going to display there. And then the menu tabs are the functions that your employer can accomplish once they're inside. So you can decide, like by default, as you see here, tab 1 is going to be called Documents, which is basically the EMR documents that you've shared. And then tab 2 is Billing, where you can decide if you're going to let them have invoices, receivable reports, and aging reports. There's a new user type under login credentials. So when you go to your settings configuration login details, there's now a user type called employer. So you can generate the password based on the rules you just defined in that settings up above. So you would come in here to login details, set lawyer or user type employer, go into the binocular, choose your employer. In our example, we've chosen Walgreens Pharmacy. Assign the user ID. The system, of course, will create one automatically based on the name of the employer to make it unique. You can overwrite it if you want. There will need to be an email present in order to auto-generate the password. You can manually assign a password as well and then tell the employer what it is. This is the template. By default, of course, this will be included in your upgrade. You can customize it if you need to modify the content to include the URL. It does have instructions that their password to open the attachment is their federal tax ID number and that is not their portal password. That is the password to open the document which has their portal password. Everything's encrypted in this world of dealing with portals and PHI. This email goes to their external, their Outlook, their Gmail, whatever they use, telling them how to get into the portal. Once they're in the portal, then that is where it's secured, where they can access the PHI. So now we're going to look at the portal. We've done the setup at the practice level, configured the menu and the greeting, and added our license disclaimer. We've given the employer the login. So now we're going to log in as the employer. So the login screen, when they launch the URL, here at number 1 on the left-hand margin where it says Welcome to Prognosis Employer Portal by Bizmatics, and then you have a paragraph, that is those 4 lines that you customize. So that will say whatever you tell it to. Number 2 is where you're going to enter the user ID and password, click the login button, or if they've forgotten it, they can click number 4 to reset their password. And if they do that, then it's going to ask them, they're going to get this link. They have to say forgot password. They do still have to enter their user ID and email address, and then they're going to get a prompt if there is a registered email on file for them or not. Because, and again, this goes back to, are they using the employer master? Because if this employer or this email address is not on file in Prognosis Employer Master, then it's going to have a phone number there where they have to call you to get it set. It will not let them reset it automatically. But as you see in the example on the left, if they exist in your Employer Master with this email address and a federal tax ID, then it's going to reset it for them, and they won't have to call you. This is another template for the password email now, so that when they are getting it brand new, this is a template again that you can control, and this shows you the layout where the attachment requires a password number 1. That password is their federal tax ID, and then when they open that document after entering the tax ID, what you see here pictured in number 2 is their actual patient portal login. And then we either way, whether it was the brand new one you issued or it just got reset because they forgot it, now they're going to be prompted to change it right away. Because whenever a password is created the first time or reset, it is always good for one time only. That is the same across the board in all of our modules. So this is what the employer will see as far as having to change their password. This is the disclaimer that you can customize, that employer portal settings that we looked at a few slides back. If you turn it on, and then you can attach a document that you've created with your user disclaimer or your license agreement, whatever you want to present to your employer. That comes up the first time they log in under a new password. So it doesn't come up every time they log in, just as you in Prognosis now. If you reset your password and you log in the first time after you've changed it, you have to accept the disclaimer again. That is also how this portal works. So now we're logged in. We're going to look at the actual portal itself and how to use it. The home page, which is what you get as soon as you've entered your user ID and password successfully, looks like this. In the upper left, we'll have the clinic or the physician's logo and name. The employer name will display at the right, where you see number 2, Welcome Walgreens Pharmacy. So the design here is just like Prognosis homepage, just like the portal homepage. It's just going to welcome the employer instead of welcoming the user or welcoming the patient. And in the upper left, they will know the clinic, the doctor, based on however you've got your program defined. Then you see your menu tabs at number 3. You've got documents and you've got billing. Number 4 shows you the patient search field. So by default, in descending order, it has every patient that is registered with your clinic that uses this employer, but they also can search specifically for a name. So it defaults running, I apologize, I'm tongue twisted. By default, it's going to give you a running list of every patient who has data within the employer that you've shared on the EMR tab or on the billing tab that has been billed under an employer invoice. But you also can search for a desired patient if you want. And then you've got the details there at the bottom where number 5 is. And that part is what changes based on the tab selections you've made above and whether or not you've made a search and made a choice out of your search field. But this is the default view when you first log in. If you choose to use the search field, then you will see a list, an autocomplete list of patient names with date of birth, as you see here next to my number 1. You choose the patient that you want, and then that is going to display that patient only document. So as we see here at the bottom of our screen, we're looking only at Olivia Pope's documents now. So it's a filtered version of this. This is employer level, all patients included documents, but now we have filtered it to one patient. And so this is where the patient ban gets invoked. So while the employer is viewing this one individual patient's data, that patient ban has a snapshot of their photograph as well as the 8 fields of data you have defined so that they can verify as they're looking through the documents who they're dealing with. Now, back in the default view, if they want to look at a specific patient, if you notice here my number 1, the patient's names are hyperlinked. That will also open up this filtered view for that patient. So in the default view, you have the option of either searching for your name in number 4 or down in the bottom in number 5 where all your details are. If you click the hyperlinked name, either one opens that specific patient's filtered documents. Now, each page that displays contains 15 documents. These are the clinic shared documents. We mentioned up above on the patient portal, the enhancement includes clinic shared documents. That is what we're dealing with here also on the employer level. These are documents on the EMR document list that have been designated as shared on this portal. There's up to 15 per page, and if you notice my number 4 in the lower right, pagination exists. So if there are more than 15, a second page will pop up. When there's more than 30, a third page will show up, and so on. The little eyeball icon off to the far right allows you to preview that document. And if you notice in the details section here, between my number 1 and my number 2 bubbles, it looks just like your document list in EMR. You've got your attachment type, your document category, the subject, and the attending doctor associated with that attachment. So this is now the employer's version of your document list. The difference is in EMR document list, you have everything. Here you have only what you have shared with the employer. And if they click the eyeball to preview it, it opens up in a pop-up just like it does now on your document list. It's a readable PDF that they can then print or look at online. Now this is one limitation to note. Because the patient register only has one employer per patient, and there's one document list per patient. If the patient's employer changes, the documents you have shared on the employer portal will no longer be available to the original employer for whom they were shared. They will now become available to the new employer. So that is something that you want to be mindful of. If a patient's employer changes, this would be a workflow decision for those of you who do employer billing. Registration would need a workflow in place that they want to unshare these documents before they change the employer. So that's your EMR tab, or the Documents tab. It's basically just automatically giving you the document list of only those documents you've shared. And that's the only option on the EMR side for the employers. Now on the Billing tab, you'll notice you have three choices. You have submenus of Invoices, Payments, and Aging. And this is the primary thrust of the employer portal, is for clients who do the employer billing. The employers want to track their invoices, track their payments, and so on. So under the Billing tab, you can then choose whether you want to look at the invoice history, the payments, or the aging, and each of those have a submenu as well. And of course, whatever you're looking at through this tab can be printed. You see over there on far right, number 3, there's a printer, so you can print whatever it is that you've displayed down below. So list of invoices would be the first submenu. This is going to give you a table of all invoices, settled or unsettled, that have been generated for the employer for all patients. Now this is a read-only list in descending order by invoice date. Read-only in that you don't have any detail behind it. It's just telling you the invoice number, the date the invoice was generated, and the overall total of that invoice. This would be useful in tracking invoices that have been generated at the invoice level only, where you don't care about claim or patient level details. If you notice in the far left column, invoice number, it's in descending order, so it goes 17, 16, 15, 14, etc. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Maybe 6 is gone because someone deleted it. This would give you the ability of tracking it, and then you'd want to know where's number 6. Why does it go from number 7 to number 5? And you don't really care about the specific details otherwise. That's what this purpose is. Then there is one, Invoices with Claims, where it does take that same report but now expands it to include claim level details. So now you've got additional columns here so that you can see the claim level details by date of service and patient. And then that goes one step further, claim level and charge level. So now you see it starts expanding the tabular details. Now for each individual invoice, each individual patient and date of service claim is broken out by charge code level. So you can really start getting to the granular level that you need to if you're, again, the accounts payable at the employer and you're wanting to track all of this before you make payment. Then we go to our payments option. Defaults to payments not posted. This is a table of payments that the employer has sent to the clinic, but the clinic has not yet entered the employer receipt header, or the clinic has entered the employer receipt header under the billing side, but hasn't yet applied the payment, meaning they have not clicked the ready to post yet. So the receipt is in prognosis. You've probably deposited the money, but you haven't yet adjudicated the money against the claims. So it's setting in an E status. Then you've got payments posted where the clinic has actually applied the money. And you see there the payment details, whether the employer paid by check, credit card, etc. And then you've got the payments with invoices, which is going to include patient level and claim level details. So both at the invoice level and at the payment level, you can do it just high-level overview, claim level, or detail level. And then you have aging reports, and there's different aging here. If the employers use TPAs, we talked about in our billing session when we go into the billing workflow, individual employers may use third-party administrators for certain aspects of their job. You can break out your aging by those TPAs if needed or by job. So that's based on how the employers require your invoices to be billed. So their aging can also be broken out according to their processes. So that is the functionality available to the employers. Now, I mentioned that there's an appendix here that gives you a list of all the documents that can be shared. This starts off with how to share it in EMR. So this is now just copy and paste it out of the EMR session. If you've already attended the EMR session, then you're aware that there's a new user role that can be given to any human in your practice that needs the ability of sharing documents. The document list has this new icon at the middle that will be enabled when they have that user role, and then they can select the document, which they can then share by turning it on or off for each portal. And this will give you the patient portal, the referring doctor, and the employer portal if you have those portals in your contract. If the document is not yet ready to be shared, you get the not applicable for sharing. And the reason it may not be ready is based on these different conditions. If the result hasn't been reviewed, but you require it to be, or if the doctor has hidden it, if the letter out has not been generated, if the encounter has not been closed, there's certain conditions in there that each document type may not yet be ready to be shared. All right, so now the upgrade, what's next, of course, is once you are notified of the upgrade, or once you're scheduled for the upgrade, you'll be notified. Now, this is dealing with logging into Prognosis, of course. Portals are external, but this will at least allow you to know that 7 days out, you're about to be upgraded. So if you are waiting for the portal, you'll know that the portal will become available 7 days out. Any questions, of course, you can direct to technical support. Then now that we have portals as a separate module, if you notice here at the very bottom, our release notes, previously we just lumped our portal upgrades into EMR. But now that we have 3 separate portals, also you may have noticed, even though I didn't highlight it, the title of our session is Portals and Apps, because we also have our mobile phone apps, both Android and iPhone. There was nothing new in the Denali upgrade, so none of that content is included here. But moving forward, we are going to have separate dedicated sessions to all of our mobile apps. So that is why now inside our release notes under Help Topics, you have a 3rd category. So even though there's overlap, the release notes are now going to be maintained separately for our portals and applications outside of the EMR and practice management. And there are no videos yet for any of these portal changes or for Denali itself, but eventually they will be available. This PowerPoint, I know some of you, most people that attend the webinars always want to know about getting a copy of the PowerPoint. It is available to download from the Resource Center now, and a recorded version. I've actually been recording this session, so it will be uploaded probably later today as well. So you will be able to download a recorded version of this session momentarily. Alrighty, so that is the extent of our portals upgrade. Are there any questions from those of you who have remained present? I will assume silence is golden, so you all have a pleasant rest of your week, and we will see you again in another session one day. Have a good evening.